against the Syrian regime and armed opposition groups and the Islamic State that are primarily responsible for all this killing. It then goes on to say at some length that Russia, the U.S., France, and Britain, these permanent members of the Security Council, could be crucial to ending the suffering, but instead they're undermining their own resolutions by continuing to arm people on the ground, contributing their own military strikes, and failing, they argue, to sufficiently pressure their allies to save lives.
But failing to stop the war is different than fanning the flames. I mean, this report is actually saying these countries are making things worse.
That's right. It's quite a damning allegation coming from groups that have not been all that vocal before, and groups, we should note, that need some level of government support to do their jobs.
Well, so Peter, do these groups clump these four countries together and lay blame, basically equally?
To some extent, but Russia does come in for special criticism over its deadly airstrikes. Also, the report says, for failing to stop the Syrian regime from using things like besieging and starvation as weapons of war. Earlier this week in Geneva, Jan Egeland with the Norwegian Refugee Council, one of the groups behind this report, said there are still 7 areas from the list of besieged areas where they can't get aid to people, and he said every single one of them is being besieged either by the Syrian government or the Islamic State. So that clearly puts the blame, I think, on one side a bit more than another.
Is there any patience at all, Peter? Because, I mean, the U.S. and Russia have this ceasefire in place. It's fragile, but one of the keys has been to open up some of these areas to humanitarian aid. It doesn't sound like these groups are being patient with Russia and the U.S. at all here.
Well, and yes, and these positive developments did come most likely just as this report was being finalized and readied for release, so they had to add in a bit about it at the very end. And they do say it's the most hopeful thing that's happened, but they say now the tremendous test facing all these world powers is to get their allies on the ground, to keep their guns quiet, allow humanitarian aid in, and hope that diplomats can get something more permanent in the way of a ceasefire.
So the report ends with a little bit of optimism, at least. I mean, in a moment when the UN is trying diplomatically to reach some kind of political transition in Syria.
Yes, there's some hope, more certainly than there has been, but the report basically says major changes are going to be needed, both on the part of the combatants and their international allies, and there's not a lot of sign of that yet.
All right, NPR's Peter Kenyon in Istanbul reporting on a new report about violence in Syria that appears to just be getting worse at this point. Peter, thanks.
Thanks, David.
And now we have the story of one refugee. He lives in Ohio. He's now a U.S. citizen. And this Tuesday, he'll be casting a vote for the very first time. M.L. Schultze from member station WKSU reports.
Please raise your
Two things are a constant at naturalization ceremonies. Lots of pictures and lots of reminders that with citizenship comes responsibility. The responsibility to vote. Mahananda Luitel takes that responsibility seriously. He and his wife became citizens last April. They were born in the Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan and forced with about 100,000 others into refugee camps in Nepal. 10 years ago, with little of the attention now swirling around other groups of refugees, the Bush administration opened the U.S. borders to about 60,000 of them.
We were looking for a durable solution to life, for our sustenance, for the better life of our children, and the U.S. government became so willing, so acceptable, so generous.
After medical, security, and other screening, the Luitels, expecting their second child, headed for Texas in 2009, then moved north, where a large Bhutanese Nepali population has settled in and around Akron. Now these refugees are learning just what it means to be a voter in the key swing state of Ohio. As a political refugee, Mahananda says voters should insist the country comes before party. He's particularly intrigued by Hillary Clinton.
A great nation like America would give an example to the rest of the world that Americans are not biased. They would give opportunity even to women.
And, still trying to make up his mind, he sat down to watch one of the most recent GOP debates with his 13-year-old son, Anuj.
This little guy has lied so much.
The Luitels have just moved into a new house, so the internet connection was spotty, and that may be a good thing. It cut out briefly, just about the time Donald Trump and Marco Rubio got into a debate about the size of body parts. But Mahananda and Anuj heard plenty of the rest, including a debate over immigration.
I'm going to build a wall. I'm the one that wants the wall.
Anuj looked up from his iPad, quizzical.
There's always negotiation.
If you are trying to get Mexico to build a wall, that's like me trying to get my brother to give me the iPad when he just came home from school. He's not going to do it unless I convince him saying he can use my laptop, so he will have to negotiate. He doesn't seem very good at negotiating from the debate.
Mahananda says he would have no heart if he didn't think about the fate of other refugees and immigrants. But he's also worried about national security, the economy, and education. And as a man of peace, he says he worries about guns on the streets. But for Mahananda Luitel, the American election is not just for Americans. It's an example for the rest of the world. And that's where he hesitates over the nature of the current political debate. He says it's all tone over substance.
It pleases our ears when we hear who wears what sort of pants and who makes what sort of personal comments, but let there be a serious debate on the issues.
A recent Pew Center study shows naturalized citizens are more likely to vote than the U.S. population overall. One reason may be the process, the classes, the tests, the ceremonies. Mahananda Luitel says he'll vote simply because he is now a very responsible member of this nation. How he'll vote, though, he hasn't yet decided. For NPR News, I'm ML Schultze in Akron, Ohio.
All right, we appreciate you listening this morning on your public radio member station, and we would appreciate if you would connect with us on social media throughout the day. You can find the Morning Edition Facebook page, also find us on Twitter at NPR Green, at NPR Montaigne, at NPR Inskeep, and at Morning Edition. And your NPR member station is WNYC in New York. We're at 7:41, 57 degrees. It is cloudy right now in New York City. I'm Richard Hake. Good morning. You can expect a cloudy morning, maybe some light rain showers, but then we should clear to partly sunny skies later on this afternoon. Highs in the lower 60s. Gets chilly tonight. Lows will be in the lower 40s, and then warms up a little bit for the weekend. Highs around 60 degrees both Saturday and Sunday.
WNYC is supported by the new thriller Eye in the Sky, starring Helen Mirren and Alan Rickman. British intelligence, American drones, and Kenyan operatives converge on the new front line of modern warfare, now in select theaters. Geico, offering auto insurance coverage for cars, trucks, or SUVs, and providing 24/7 customer service. More information on auto insurance at geico.com or 1-800-947-AUTO.
At WNYC, we love NPR News as much as you do. That's why we bring it to you every day.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Dave Mattingly. Former First Lady Nancy Reagan's funeral is today in Simi Valley, California. Among those attending the service at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, Michelle Obama and former First Ladies Laura Bush, Hillary Clinton, and Rosalind Carter. Former President George W. Bush will also be there. Nancy Reagan died Sunday at age 94. President Obama travels to Austin, Texas today. He'll be addressing the South by Southwest Interactive Festival. Here's NPR's Scott Horsley.
Obama's the first sitting president to speak at the big South by Southwest Technology and Music Festival. The White House sees this as a chance to reach out to a young and tech-savvy audience. The president will be looking for both ideas and volunteers to help use technology to tackle some of the big challenges facing the country.
The Archbishop of Canterbury is speaking out about Europe's efforts to deal with large numbers of migrants and refugees. Larry Miller has more from London.
Justin Welby says fear is a valid emotion in times of such colossal crisis, and it needs to be addressed. The Archbishop of Canterbury argues it's outrageous to condemn concerned Europeans as racist. He says they have a legitimate right to worry about the effect refugees will have on jobs, housing, and health services.
And Wall Street futures are higher this morning. I'm Dave Mattingly, NPR News in Washington.
I'm Richard Hake on WNYC in New York. Authorities say they're indicting 84 gang members from the Bronx who traded drugs in Massachusetts and New Hampshire and then returned from New England with guns. The new Bronx District Attorney, Darcel Clark, who took office in January, says the group is responsible for 22 shootings in the borough.
I will continue to eliminate gangs like these who would destroy the fabric of the Bronx.
Authorities say the group ran a $10,000 a week crack cocaine business. Of the 84 people indicted, 18 remain at large. Mayor de Blasio is defending his Vision Zero goal of no traffic fatalities.
We say Vision Zero because it's our goal, and we are audacious in trying to reach that very goal.
The mayor was responding to comments by Police Commissioner Bill Bratton. Speaking at a traffic safety conference earlier in the day, Bratton said achieving zero traffic deaths is similar to a city without crime, a good goal but virtually impossible. Blasio countered that the commissioner himself has been the chief enforcer of new safety initiatives, including a lower speed limit and punishments for drivers who fail to yield to pedestrians. 234 people died from crashes last year, the fewest recorded since 1910. The Vision Zero plan calls for no traffic deaths by the year 2024. Cloudy skies this morning, some light rain, maybe some drizzle, but then partly sunny later on this Friday. Highs will be in the lower 60s today. It'll be clear tonight. It does get chilly with lows in the lower 40s, and then Saturday and Sunday, highs around 60 degrees. It'll be sunny on Saturday, but cloudy on Sunday.
The level of incompetence in this office is staggering.
I'm David Remnick. I don't envy the writers of the show Veep, because these days, real-life politics is much stranger than fiction.
When this show started, it was political satire, and now it feels really like a somber documentary.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus, the star of Veep. She joins me next time on the New Yorker Radio Hour. Saturday mornings at 10 on 93.9 FM.
This is Morning Edition from NPR News. Good morning, I'm David Green. People in positions of power, world leaders, lawmakers, maybe CEOs, often have to collaborate with one another. Sometimes they're trying to make a decision about something. Sometimes they're trying to come up with a creative way of doing something. Well, there's new social science research suggesting that there's something that gets in the way of them achieving their goals. And to understand what that is, we're joined by NPR social science correspondent Shankar Vedantam. Hey, Shankar.
Hi, David.
Hi, so Shankar, we're talking about people who I guess are used to getting what they want at moments when they're not getting what they want, right?
Exactly. These are the people who are used to being the 800-pound gorillas in their own worlds, David. But when they have to sit with other 800-pound gorillas, they have to sort out who's in charge. And what researchers find is that when this happens, the power dynamics can make it difficult for these people to work collaboratively. I was speaking with Angus Hildreth. He's at the UC Berkeley Haas School of Business. And along with Cameron Anderson, they went to a company and had executives at this company divide themselves into 4-person teams. So the first team had the 4 most powerful people at the company. The second team had the next 4 powerful people at the company, and so on, 150, 200 people. When the executives were asked to evaluate different candidates for a high-level position and reach a consensus, what the researchers found was that teams with less powerful executives reached consensus far more easily than teams with the high-power executives. Here's Hildreth.
These more powerful teams tended to focus less on what was going on the task itself and talk about other things, and they tended to vie for position in the groups, so they tended to conflict over who should be leading what. These teams failed to share all of the information they had about their own candidates with everyone else.
You know, David, the interesting thing is that we see this kind of setting all the time. Managers getting together to decide something, heads of state getting together. We imagine that when these high-power people get together to collaborate, they will reach a consensus, when in fact, the fact that they are powerful can make it harder for them to collaborate.
But wait a minute, Shankar. I mean, longer deliberations, not necessarily a bad thing if they eventually lead to some worthy goal. So is power always a problem here?
In fact, power is not always a bad thing. Hildreth and Anderson, in fact, find that there are advantages to power. When people work on problems on their own, giving people a sense of power actually increases their creativity, their ability to come up with novel solutions. And it's not surprising. You feel like you have the autonomy to do things. The problem is in experiments when the researchers give people a sense of power and then ask them to do something creative in collaboration with others who are also powerful, they find something completely different. Here's Hildreth again.
We find that the high power folk are less creative. They come up with less creative ideas than the less powerful people. It's not that their power is making them less creative, it's that there's something going on when they have to coordinate with each other.
Okay, so longer deliberating, maybe never coming to some kind of consensus, and less creativity. That does sound like a problem. Is there a solution where we can get the best of both worlds? I mean, good deliberation among smart people who have power and also remain creative in the process.
Right. So I think there are a couple of ideas, one of which I think is already in widespread practice. Many organizations have figured out that if you want to reach a deal in Congress, for example, or you want to reach an international agreement, you often have lower ranked people meet first and try and set up a framework for agreement before you bring the big guns into the room. Another solution that Hildreth suggested is to allow each leader ample room to take the spotlight and establish his or her importance as a way to sort of get that out of the way and allow people to set aside the power dynamics and actually get down to work.
So a lot of massaging of egos that needs to go on, I guess.
I'm not quite sure I would put it in that language, David, but yeah.
Okay. Shankar, thanks as always.
Thanks, David.
That's Shankar Vedantam. He's NPR's social science correspondent. He's also the host of a new podcast that explores the unseen patterns in human behavior. It's called Hidden Brain. This is NPR News.
And this is WNYC. You're listening to Morning Edition. Good morning. I'm Richard Hake. 57 degrees. We do have cloudy skies right now in New York City. Stay with us for Money Talking. That's coming up next. And then in the next hour on Morning Edition, it's been 5 years since a massive earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear meltdown killed 19,000 people in Japan. Radiation forced many survivors from their homes, and many are still displaced. A new poll finds that people in the swing state of Ohio are divided over whether the Affordable Care Act has been good for them or bad for them. And then in this week's StoryCorps, the actor who played Officer Clemens on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood will reflect on the 25 years he spent on the show. Those stories all coming up in the next hour of Morning Edition here on WNYC. Some cloudy skies this morning. We could see another passing rain shower, but it should clear to partly sunny skies this afternoon. Highs expected in the lower 60s. Tonight, mostly clear with lows in the lower 40s, and the outlook for the weekend. Saturday should be sunny, highs around 60. Highs around 60 on Sunday, but mostly cloudy, and then rain is likely on Monday with highs in the lower 50s. Don't forget to spring forward this weekend. Daylight saving time returns on Sunday morning.
Support for NPR comes from WNYC members and from the Economic Development Authority of Fairfax County, Virginia, committed to using the power of ideas to nourish more than 400 international companies from nearly 50 countries. Details at powerofideas.org. And Jones Day, an integrated partnership collaboratively providing legal services for more than a century. 43 offices, 5 continents, serving clients as one firm worldwide. Learn more at jonesday.com.
It's Money Talking from WNYC. I'm Charlie Herman.
Ford is building a $2.5 billion plant in Mexico. It's not going to happen. I'm going to say, folks, we got to stop this.
I understood that these trade agreements were going to destroy the middle class of this country.
We're going to beat all of these countries that are taking so much of our money away from us on a daily basis.
Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders are tapping into voter angst about the economy and specifically trade. For many years, Republicans and Democrats alike have championed the benefits of global trade, from NAFTA to the more recent Trans-Pacific Partnership. But many voters see these deals as creating winners and losers, and they are the losers, with their jobs being sent overseas or their wages being cut. But with me now are Rana Foroohar with Time Magazine and Catherine Rempel with The Washington Post. And Catherine, it has been more than 20 years since NAFTA was signed, so how has it changed our economy?
You know, if you talk to economists, I think that they would say that it's helped grow our economy. It's helped improve the growth and incomes of our neighbors as well. That doesn't mean that there aren't winners and losers. You know, in aggregate terms, on net, there have been benefits, but there have been some losses, and they're highly concentrated and painful losses, and there are workers who have not recovered from that.